For our presentation, we will be exploring traditional American images and concepts of femininity. So the theme of traditional American female images and concepts explores the controversial representation that exemplifies women, promoting questions surrounding how women's portrayal in American literature, based on the social roles of wife, mother, and sex object, diminishes female humanity. The chosen topics supported our decision to further our research, giving us a purpose to break down these stereotypical images of women that limit the female character's humanity within our selected narratives, and explore how the female characters in our chosen narratives transcend their social roles. Our primary focus is on how these traditional roles reduced women to merely role players. With the specific question, how do these traditional images or roles limit white women's humanity in America during the 19th century, with further consideration into how the retelling of this 19th century role differentiates for 21st century audience expectations. Other questions that we are considering include, how do these characters push past being merely role players, wife, mother, etc., or how do these narratives undermine the cultural validity of these stereotypes? For this presentation, we would like you to keep in mind our suggested thesis. The traditional role and image representation during the 19th century reduced and limited the humanity of American white women, of the middle class, defining them to merely role players. But with this idea of diminished humanity, we want to relay that it has also progressed into the 21st century, with narratives continuing to place women into these traditional roles. With a feminine consideration that isn't enough. The 21st century audience expectation of female representation have progressed, but these roles and ideas are still persistent throughout the 21st century retelling chosen. So the selected narratives that prompted our thesis are the 2019 film Little Women, directed by the American female director Greta Gerwig, and the short story The Angel Over the Right Shoulder, written by the American author Elizabeth Stuart Phelps. The narrative selected allowed us to explore the roles placed on the female character. It gives us the ability to examine how these roles diminished the character's humanity and how they transcended their traditional roles. We focused on white middle-class women due to the selected narrative predominantly considering only this demographic. We shied away from bringing people of color and other demographics into consideration because the experiences would be far different due to discrimination and other factors like social class and cultural differences. To support our thesis, we evaluated these selected narratives and managed to develop central ideas that revolved around the critical subject matter of the limitation on female humanity relative to our chosen social class and race. The short story, The Angel Over the Right Shoulder, written by the American author Elizabeth Stuart Phelps, was first published in 1852. The short story depicts the conflict Miss James, the protagonist, finds herself in. This female character struggles with her domestic role of wife and mother because of her desire to develop as a person outside of her biological social roles. The author introduces two different ideas about women's roles, the first being a role revolving around home and family, having no individual identity beyond being a mother and wife. The second is a woman finding the importance and desire to develop her interests and personhood while still fulfilling her duties as wife and mother. Our central idea around this is Phelps revealed in her short story, The Angel Over the Right Shoulder, the obstacles women faced in the 19th century in their attempts to develop themselves outside the social norms of women. The interruptions Miss James faced when she is given time to focus on herself, her guilt that she feels when she leaves her social responsibilities as mother and wife, her guilt even slipping into her dreams with her seeing angels who follow her around, marking her good and evil deeds. Her willingness to sacrifice her time for her family's needs and wife and mother duties. She stepped away from her time to mend her husband's clothes. She stepped away to take care of her child because they didn't have a proper meal to serve guests. She stepped away to see the caller who came during her break. These obstacles were in a way Miss James's conflict with not fulfilling her domestic duties fully while trying to cultivate herself. Her ideology of being a good mother and good wife was the most significant obstacle she faced. But during this time when women were raised to fulfill these roles, it was not her fault that she was her biggest obstacle. Women's duties during this time were to her children and husband, and the idea of doing anything for herself was seen as selfish, or in this narrative, an evil deed that deserved penance. Miss James, in the end, concluded that her trying to cultivate her mind and do something for herself should be as equally as important as her duty to family and vice versa. This new ideology and way of thinking was the first step Miss James took to transcend outside her domestic sphere of merely mother and wife. The original idea to take time for herself was not even her own, with her husband making the decision. But in this final scene, she makes her first decision to transcend her sole role of caretaker and become someone who has an identity of her own making.